Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be joining us from. Coming to you live from the damp Pacific Northwest. Is there a less appetizing word than damp?
Moist.
Moist and damp, like weirdly, like right up there. Like nobody wants to hear that word. And it's very damp in the Pacific Northwest today. I am Devin Morgan, and I be the director of youth baseball at Driveline, founder of the Driveline Academy. Rest in peace to Dave, plug 2 from De La Soul. Just had to get that out there. Joined as usual by my partner in crime and brother Jeremy Techteal. We're going to talk about bunting today. And we've gotten likely 50, 60 hours of this at this point. No, not that much.
Of the pod?
Of the pod, probably 35 hours. And shout out to you guys who are listening. Like weirdly, we just kind of did this thing because we wanted to talk about youth player development, and now we have a lot of people that are listening, so that's tight. So as a person that has video on YouTube, I am obligated to say, please like and subscribe and click the bell notification button because it helps the algorithm. Review us on iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Like do all the things if you can, because that's great. And if you've already shared the podcast with people, hugely appreciated. So almost like a legitimate entire works week of content on youth baseball, and we're going to talk about bunting in a discreet and dedicated fashion for the first time. And if you're joining us on a visual platform, brought back the OG t-shirt because I said never and I meant it. However, I have to be honest. I had this conversation with my son last night because in preparation for the show, I was listening to I think A-Rod on like his whatever YouTube thing, he like got Barry.
Bad start. It's a bad start.
Coming hot out the gate. A-Rod had Barry Bonds over FaceTime or some weird thing, and Barry Bonds is
telling kids to bunt.
So I think the best way to get into this, right, is like let's talk about the typical, tropes for why people advocate for this approach, and we can explain ours. Right? The longer tail thing of trying to go like, well, never bunt, how is that going to play out, is probably a story that's going to take some time, right, to unfold. Because effectively, the reason we made the shirt originally, and the reason that I am very much like never bunt at like 14U down, is all about compounding interest, right? That's just the whole point, is to lay a bet that says if I take this skills at scale, skill-driven approach, and if I compound interest on the time and the repetitions and the focus on getting good at the thing that matters most long-term, which is moving fast, that you are going to be better at that specific skill. And of course, this is the point where everybody actually is the whole thing, right? So A-Rod, we can just start right off, right? A-Rod has Barry Bonds on FaceTime. And Barry Bonds is sitting up there, showing how he would lay it down. He's like, first of all, Barry, come on. But second,
when was the last time you think Barry Bonds was asked to bunt in a game? What age? How old do you think Barry Bonds was the last time a coach was like, I would like you to give up your at-bat here?
He was an Arizona guy, right?
Yeah.
Am I remembering that correctly?
He went to ASU.
ASU. Did Barry Bonds bunt in college?
No shot.
No shot, man.
There's no shot. Anybody above 10U has ever asked that dude, whose dad was a big leaguer, who is always probably the best player on the team,
right,
to lay one down and sacrifice for someone who's better.
Why? Why is the kid who's possibly the most gifted hitter ever, or at least in that conversation, right? You're in that pantheon of an ecosystem. Jack Butler, Jerry Butler.
I was gonna try to throw it in there.
There may or may not be a Driveline Academy podcast faux drinking game where people are taking a fake shot when we say words like ecosystem. So in this ecosystem that Barry Bonds is existing in and developing in, right? What did that kid do the most? It's pretty apparent, and I'm just kind of spitballing here. I think he swung a lot,
and probably hard. Probably swung hard,
right? So for us, again, the skills at scale explanation of the never bunt perspective is simply that there is more value to have a focused approach on the thing that matters most. So then the well actually, right? And so we'll jump into this. So Barry Bonds tells A-Rod that like the best thing to do if you're struggling as a hitter is to lay one down, right? Because you get a chance to kind of see it right off the bat. And there's more layers to this kind of this thought. So to start breaking these down piece by piece, I think the reason that sounds like a preposterous suggestion is because if you're struggling as a hitter, you're struggling to swing the bat.
Yep.
Maybe that has to do with a vision issue, right? You're not seeing the ball well. Like, and that's a thing that guys will say, right? I feel like it looks like a beach ball today, and then it feels like it looks like a ping pong ball, right? And both of those things can be true. Yeah, I get what you're saying, right? I'm gonna lay it down. It's gonna really force me to see something. However, hitting is a perception and action task. So seeing the ball well doesn't mean that you can hit unless you can correlate your action to your perception.
Otherwise, you could just stand in a cage and then automatically be a good hitter and just like watch like 1,000 pitches and be like, I am now an elite hitter because I have timed up all of this.
Right.
And then you swing and you're like, oh, I actually got to hit this.
Because you have to link these two things together, right? Like all the research, all the good research on progressive skill acquisition, ecological dynamics of skill acquisition, it's 3, would suggest that the real value is in linking these two things together, right? You have to link your perception of the activity to the action necessary to try to solve the problem. And this is like, Rob Gray, man, is just like the man when it comes to talking about this stuff. And he's right because it's been borne out and it's true. So again, like this idea that like, well, I'm just going to lay one down and that's going to help me see the ball better. Like, well, for one, maybe you just need to see the ball better. Maybe that is the thing, right? And that's a perceptual task, but bunting doesn't necessarily like maximize your ability to do that, right? I mean, you could, even if you really want to go down the rabbit hole, turning around to square it is actually putting you in a position where both of your eyes have kind of like equal perspective on the ball. That's not hitting.
Right.
That's legitimately not hitting. Secondarily, like there was video floating around over this last week or so. Trace Thompson was standing in for Clayton Kershaw throwing a pen, right? And Trace Thompson went out and hit like 3 pumps or something like that. That's great. Go Dodgers. To whatever degree, it helped Trace Thompson to see the ball by sitting in on those, right? To your point, you can't just look at the baseball and produce. You have to link action to perception. That's just the way that it works. So I would offer, Barry, I think you deserve to be in the Hall, but I don't know that I buy this idea. I think you're just regurgitating something that's been passed down that like, hey, turning around to square it is just going to help you be a better hitter.
Well, he doesn't believe that.
Well, and also
he I am sure had slumps in his career, and I can guarantee you he didn't get out of a slump by just taking a game and be like, I'm going to lay down 4 bunts today, and then tomorrow I'm going to be good. That's just like not a thing that happens. And like most of the time with slumping, I always go back to I'm not going to remember exactly what it was, but there was a phenomenal, as most Joey Votto tweets are, there was a phenomenal Joey Votto tweet about like what it feels like to be in a slump. And it was like you're going through a labyrinth, and like you make it all the way through, and you open the door at the end, or it's like a maze, and you open the door at the end, and then there's just like more mazes. Like right. It's just like a larger labyrinth that you open the door to. Like most of the time, it's not mechanical when you're in a slump. It is confidence based.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And what's a better way to say I don't have confidence in myself than to lay your bat across the plate and hope that the ball hits it? Like that's not going to help you get your confidence back in the ability to swing and hit a moving baseball.
The experience of being in a batting slump is that it feels like a labyrinth. One feels trapped, alone, and disoriented. When you finally get out, you are relieved and can't believe how easy it was to find the exit. Unfortunately, that exit eventually leads to another labyrinth. Hitting is hard.
Hitting is really hard.
Like hitting is hard, and I think sometimes when we look to like the feels and thoughts and ideas of guys at the highest level of consequence, that signal is really good, and sometimes it's really awful. It can push you in a weird place. this, because it's just all about like the mental side of being a hitter, I think is something that kind of plays both ways, right? This is absolutely a big leaguer that has a perfectly valid perspective about hitting at the highest level of consequence and competition. We should take signal from that. And it's something that I think is applicable to youth as well, because you could say, to whatever degree Joey flippin' Votto has this feeling, your average 11-year-old, if they go 0 for 2 to start like a game or start a tournament weekend, is going to feel that same thought.
No, it's going to be. I would.
Well, actually, you're right. It's
way worse. Way worse.
It's way worse, right? And again, like Joey Votto is able to
I suck. I'm never going to get a hit again. I don't like this. I'm not enjoying this. I'm a loser.
Right. And I think, of the 30 or 40 hours of content we've put out on this pod, we've talked a lot about the reason that it is incredibly important and effective for coaches to start to understand why kids have this really like stark black and white understanding of themselves as athletes, right? We've talked about the Jean Piaget stuff. There was a reason that is a huge part of like our youth baseball development certification. There's a reason it's part of our Skills at Scale book. There's a reason it's part of the new book that we're working on. You have to understand why youth athletes kind of have this depth of that labyrinth that they find themselves in. And again, this kind of comes back to the Bunting thing, because for me, as a youth coach, if your whole perspective is driven by kind of this question, like, are we winning, or are we losing? And the answer to that question defines, am I doing the right thing for my child? Bunting to me is like, it's like a salve. It's like it's a Band-Aid that I could put on this problem that solves the immediate term thing.
Yeah, because now he's on base.
And baseball is such just like, your success or failure in these high leverage positions, whether you're on the bump or in the box, it feels very solitary. And that's the great thing about our game, is it bounces back and forth between the team game and the individual matchup, right? And when kids get in that position of feeling inadequate at the plate, and you start to, man, I've seen it. And anybody that's coached kids for a while has seen those kids where they walk up to the box and they are already defeated.
Yep.
They're already defeated. So I understand youth coach, where you're like, hey, I want my kid to feel competent, and I don't want my kid to feel like they're not contributing. So I go, hey, like, let's just try to lay one down. We're significantly reducing the task difficulty. We talk about that a lot, right? We're scaling complexity up and down. And you're doing that as a means to kind of bake in a higher likelihood of success for that kid. The problem is that now you're kind of changing that kid's identity if you continue to do that, about how that child...
If you do it once, you're probably not only doing it once.
Correct. Because it works. Right? Like, because it works. And we're going to get into this as we start to break down, the other tropes about bunting. But like, one of the most significant arguments is that like it works. And like, you're right. You're absolutely right. When you push youth teams to kind of that breaking point of task complexity, it's highly successful for you. So I'm team never bunt, 14U on down, because I reject the idea that this consequence you fear when you lose is more impactful than the potential of like teaching a kid to hit.
Right.
And that, man, again, well, you're just going to spend 5 minutes on it. How many swings can you get in 5 minutes?
Well, and like, if you just spend 5 minutes on it, you're not going to be good at it.
Right.
Yeah, that's not like actually conquering the ability to bunt by spending 5. Like, that's one thing that always frustrates me with this argument, because I'll just come out and say it. You're team never bunt, 14U on down. I am team never bunt. If you're 70, if you're 80, I don't care. Don't bunt. Like, it's not good strategy 99% of the time. There's like very few scenarios where it actually like makes sense, and I'll allow it to happen. Shout out my old roommate Max Garrett. We had this argument, and he kind of proved me wrong. That like, he thinks bunting in like a 2-strike situation where you're totally overmatched is like not a terrible idea, and I don't totally disagree with that. Like, it mixes things up, maybe gives the pitcher a different look, whatever. There's not a whole lot of scenarios where I would willingly bunt. But like, the thing that frustrates me the most about it is the assumption that bunting is easy.
Oh, sure.
That every bunt is successful. Every time you ask a kid to lay it down, a kid that you think isn't a very good hitter, so I'm going to ask you to bunt it because I don't think you can do the job with the bat. You're expecting him to be able to do the job at the bunt. And like a lot of these kids, depending on the age, they're not great hitters. One of the problems could be they're afraid of getting hit by the baseball.
Oh, that's
is
for
that going to
sure
be
in
solved by asking them to put their face right in front of the plate? No, like it is. People just assume it's easy, like just bunt to beat the shift. Bunting is hard. Bunting is not an easy thing, especially as you move up levels and guys are throwing 102. Like bunting is just not easy.
Well, and this is even playing out, like just this last weekend, right? We in your game, there was a kid on the bump that I may or may not have a direct biological relationship to, and kid showed bunt on him, and it was like a kind of upper third fastball, and fouled it. And then there was another upper third fastball, and it's like, all right, well now I got to chase that. And he just kind of kept raising the level on him. Guy ends up going down swinging at something that's like, again, I'm just going to keep challenging you, right?
They showed bunt a lot in that game.
Yeah,
they laid down one successful bunt. It was successful for me because we got the out at first.
Because we turned the out.
And like, you could take that base. I don't care. It's youth baseball. Like, there's probably going to be a pass ball 2 pitches later, and he's going to take the base anyways. Like, you just gave up an out. But thank you.
Yeah.
Like, outs are really valuable, especially when I'm trying to keep pitch count down and keep my kids, like, under, try to get them as long in the game as possible while not throwing them for too many pitches. And you know what's really helpful for that? Giving me an out on one pitch.
It's great.
It's phenomenal. I love it. Every time they do it, I'm very happy. Because their kids aren't good at bunting. So, like, most of the time, you're not going to get that beautiful bunt right down the third base line that winds up a base hit.
Yeah.
And I had this conversation with Nate, shout out Nate, last year, where he was like, I want to bunt. I was like, oh, that's a different conversation. I will never ask you to bunt. And it's specifically the term sacrifice bunt. I will never ask you to sacrifice your at-bat because I'm telling you directly, I don't believe you can do the job. I'm never going to ask you to do that because then you're never going to be able to prove to me that you can do the job. If you like to bunt and you want to try to bunt for a hit because you see the third baseman back, I'm not going to stop you. Go for it. Have some fun.
Yeah.
It's just the other version of bunting, which is sacrifice, give up your at-bat because I don't think you can do it. You've just sent that kid a message that really is never going to go away. That you can't do this. Because bunting is just hitting the ball to the right side.
Yeah, right.
In a lot of scenarios, like that's all. Like that, right. You accomplish the same exact thing if you're willing to give up the out to move to advance the runner. There are places you can hit the ball, no matter what the situation is, that you will allow that runner to advance without and give up your out. And you're telling that kid you can't. I don't trust you to be able to accomplish that successfully.
Yeah, and it's it's a curious thing that I think some coaches just act like at the youth level that this isn't a thing that's happening where some kids, smaller kids, faster kids, are getting stigmatized to put into that position where it's like, hey, you're always going to be the one that I'm going to call to put it down. I have a problem with that because, and not to say that all of these kids, if you just give them the confidence and the freedom and the trust to go swing, are going to make it into the show. Mookie Betts, not the biggest player in the world. Focuses on bat speed. He's really good at hitting. He's a better hitter. Why can't you take that same approach when the consequences are so minimal? Like what? Because that's the thing, right? It's just like you've got these kids who are already at this like emotional precipice constantly between I'm the best athlete in the world and I feel great about myself, and I'm incompetent, and I'm a failure. Why don't you see more value in like putting your time into solving that thing? Which is not asking a kid to lay it down when everybody's on the same page that like we want to win this game, right? We talk a lot about this idea that like, yeah, we focus on the skills of scale, we are compounding interest, etc. That doesn't change the fact that when kids get into games, they want to win. Shit.
Coaches, parents, everybody wants to win.
Everybody wants
if you're
to
playing a game, you don't want to not win.
Everybody wants to win, right? So
but it's what are you willing to give up to win?
Right. And I'm telling you, man, that like the thing you're giving up is an opportunity to tell that kid that you trust them to do the thing. And you understand on the other side of that equation that if I give them that trust, that it is possible that they will fail.
Yep.
And failure, like, and to your point, right? Failure is a valid output of the equation if you ask them to lay it down or not. What signals are you sending? Why are you sending them? And what compels you to go, yeah, I trust you, man. Like, I trust you. Because to me, coaching for rec ball in 12 years and never calling for a bunt once meant that I took every kid every year and I gave them the same amount of trust. And I think that's important.
Yeah.
Like I can't prove that with data, right? I can't. There's no way that I can kind of quantify what that meant. Other than all my kids always wanted to play next year. From the best to the worst. Like, so that's my quantification, I guess. Okay. Trojan fan Frank 99. When I coached Little League, bunting was part in getting the kids to lose the fear of the ball.
Okay. Frank. Trojan fan Frank?
I think so. Yeah, he's got to be like a USC guy.
When, I have two follow-up questions to that. The main one being, I believe it started with when I coached.
When I coached. Yeah.
My guy, how long ago was that? when was
Sure.
that coaching experience? And then the second follow-up question is, okay, I hear you. Remove the fear of the ball. Why don't we just do hit-by-pitch practice? I could throw balls at kids, and I bet you I can remove the fear of being hit by a ball much quicker than bunting.
Right.
By just hitting them with baseballs.
Right. Yeah, so then he goes on. Be able to track the ball into the zone. Again, now we're like tracking is fine, but that's not.
You don't have to bunt to do that.
Correct. Plus, it was a weapon. When you have fast
There
kids
it
who
is. There
struggle,
it is.
when you have fast kids who struggle with contact, bunt base hits are like gold. And like, yeah, man, that gold is fucking.
It's like gold to who?
It's irradiated with nuclear waste.
Well,
right?
it's gold to who?
Right.
It's gold to that guy.
Yes.
Because he thinks back fondly at because he probably won a lot of games whenever he coached. It is not. It is radioactive material to those fast kids who struggle with contact, who never got a chance to not struggle with contact.
Yeah.
Also, I'd love to know what struggle with contact meant, but you know.
Yeah, I mean,
like I had a kid come to me in between our two games yesterday after a doubleheader. It was like, I don't know what's wrong. I had like struck out twice in that game. And I was like, you hit a ball to the wall. Why are you thinking about the two times you struck out twice? You know how many times Mike Trout has struck out twice in a game? Like, who cares?
Yeah.
That's a thing that kids think. Like, that kid is struggling with contact. And you give him confidence, and then maybe he hits a ball to the wall.
Yeah.
Because baseball's hard.
Yeah. Bunting. It also, Scotty G, SG412 fan. It also helps with hand-eye coordination and watching the ball.
SG412 fan. Do you think he's a fan of himself? If his name is Scotty G and SG412.
Well, and he's got like a picture of the terrible towel in his thing, so I don't know. I'm confused. 412's got to be like a Pittsburgh area code. I don't know. Shout out to Pittsburgh. So. Anyways, it helps with hand-eye coordination. My guy.
Where's the proof?
Tomato, potato, man. These two things are not the same.
Submit your evidence, my guy. Like, this is just, I can throw shit out too.
Okay. Again, bunting is a much less complex hand-eye coordination skill than the full body, proximal to distal, well-sequenced swing. So to whatever degree, even if that's accurate, and I'm not kind of punting on that being true, but even if it is, tomato, potato, man, these two things aren't the same, right? Like, because again, I'm turning around and I'm squaring up. I got both of my eyes on the ball, and I literally am just like adjusting the bat for plane of pitch. It's not swinging, right? And if you want to get better at hand-eye coordination, have your kids play video games. Like there have been studies that like draw a direct correlation between time spent playing video games and hand-eye coordination.
Careful. We don't want to advocate too much video game playing on this podcast.
Well, an appropriate amount of video game playing when you're doing a recovery day so that you can get the gains from the training that you did.
Yeah. If any of my boys are watching this, stop playing Fortnite all night.
Agree, everyone should know how to bunt. And as stated, you don't swing until you lay 2 down. 1 down third and 1 down first.
in a
training, right? Yeah. So I'm going to go in for a round of 8. And in this again, like this whole thing, like, oh, it doesn't take that long to teach. Well, like, okay, if I just lay down 2 bunts, am I really maximizing my ability to develop that skill? Let's go one step further down the rabbit hole. Let's say I struggle to let those first couple bunts down, right? So now my round of 8 ends up being like a round of 2. So you can't tell me that this stuff doesn't have cost. It has cost, man. Like this is a choose your own adventure thing. You are wasting reps that you could be spending developing something that matters more for the thing that matters less. And then the other thing, here's just a crazy idea off the top of my head.
Uh-oh.
Shouldn't you spend more time sprinting?
No.
If bunting is that easy to teach, and if all of these bunts are going to be most positively impacted, not necessarily by getting good at bunting, but by simply being able to like ball on bat and then burn, isn't there more gold in that hill?
No. I don't have anything else. They don't have anything else either. I
think I'm just thinking about this too logically. It's my fault. I coached for 14 years from 6U to high school. They had to know how to bunt. I said one day a coach is going to need you to get one down that could help win a game. So
here's the only argument that I will like actually understand. We talk about it a lot, but like I coach our 14-year-old, one of our 14U teams. I am very aware that I am sending them to high schools where I am not their coach. I may be their coach through 18U. If any of you listen to this, I'm not making any promises. But I may be their coach through 18U, but I'm going to send them to different high school coaches. And God willing, I'm going to send them to D1 colleges where they're going to have different coaches.
Yep.
Those coaches are going to expect them to have that skill.
Yep.
And I am not sending them there with that skill. Now, the way I square this argument in my head is, yeah, but I'm sending them there with a bat speed that these kids are never going to get asked to bunt. These guys are going to be middle of the order bats.
Right.
And those are not guys that are asked to bunt. The guys that are asked to bunt are the guys who you send up there who can't get a ball to the infield. And I think we proved yesterday we can get balls out of the infield.
Really?
It's not when it's like, the argument. I'll let you everyone in on a little secret here. We do highly encourage infield in at Drive On Academy, specifically because infield in, like the main thing you lose there is range for infielders, and the dirty secret is most youth infielders don't have great range in the first place. So you're really not losing that much by going infield in every situation you can, other than the ability to maybe cut off that run at home. They went infield in on us yesterday. Jacob, he doesn't listen. There's no way Jacob listens to this podcast, but shout out Jacob if you're listening.
He had a day.
He had a day. That was the only ball that he didn't put over an outfielder's head. Yeah. And he hit a rocket that literally hit off the third baseman's glove because he was playing infield in.
Yep.
That's the argument. Just hit it hard enough that you aren't asked to bunt. So like that is where I'm comfortable sending my kids off to high schools and colleges because like I don't think any of my kids are going to be asked to bunt because they're going to show up and coaches are going to want them to swing the bat because they're all pretty good at swinging the bat. And part of that is because I've never asked them to bunt and take away swings from them in a game, in a situation where, like, if they're one of the better hitters on their team in high school, which I'm hoping all of my kids are.
Yeah.
Even if they're not one of the better hitters on my team, if they're one of the better hitters on their high school team, there might be a situation where they are a normal select ball youth coach would have asked them to bunt because they're one of the worst hitters on the team. But now he's in high school, and that guy's not asking him to bunt, and he has never hit in that situation with runners on second and third trying to advance a runner or whatever because the guy hasn't bunt every single time to try to score a run. how do you expect him to just figure it out? These are situations that you need practice in. Yeah. And if you're taking the bat out of their hands, you're not allowing them to get better.
And we can play this like weird causality game too, right? You're telling me that bunting is helping my hand-eye coordination, so that's going to make hitting easier. And I disagree, because you're talking about how the less complex task that requires less coordination is somehow informative of the more complex task that requires more coordination. Flip it on its head. I would argue the opposite. I am teaching you how to get good. The royal we, are teaching you how to get good at the most complex task. I would argue that you could probably suggest that, like, by doing that, the less complex task should be easier if we're good at the more complex task, right? Like, I don't think it's an unreasonable thing to suggest that, like, hey, look, the value prop of preparing kids from the ages of like 10U to 14U for where you want them to be at 15 is informed by, yeah, man, I'm giving you a less complex task, well-intentioned high school coach, that you need to solve. Right. You don't need to teach this kid how to find barrels. You don't need to teach this kid backspeed. You don't need to teach this kid approach. All you need to do is teach this kid how to bunt.
Well, that was the other thing with, USC fan Frank.
Yes.
Was, he said he was the one who said it was like gold, right?
It's gold. It's gold. Yes.
It's just gold. Yeah, because he didn't want to have to go through the hard work of coaching the kid to be better through his contact issues. That's not easy. Kids have contact issues. It's not easy to fix that. Yep. That takes like time and effort, and it's way easier to just be like, hey, you bunt.
Yep.
Like, I'm going to spend my time with these kids because they're better. And you're just going to bunt.
And nobody wants to acknowledge that it's kind of a coaching cop-out.
It's 1,000,000%.
And that's what it is, man. I'm sorry. Like, it is. I think it is not unreasonable to suggest that a youth baseball coach's job is to emphasize and prioritize the things that are most impactful for their performance in the current term and the long term. Our game is predicated on throwing and hitting. Why is it like unbelievable to suggest that we should put more of our time, attention, and focus on those things? And that's not bunting. I'm sorry, it's just not. Okay. Not to mention, this is, I want to give him his credit. I got a lot, dog.
We got more. Let's go.
Wesley, strong Nordic lineage here. I cannot pronounce your last name, so sorry. Not to mention, bunting can destroy the pitcher's groove and rattle his rhythm. Should be a part of the game at all levels. Counterpoint, Wesley, whatever.
Don't try. You don't want to be that guy.
I think if you give up easy outs to pitchers, that's helping my confidence.
Well, right? I will tell you, we had a pitcher struggling to throw strikes yesterday.
Yes.
The only out he got was on a bunt.
Yeah.
Because he threw first 10 pitches, 8 balls. So it's no outs, first and second after 2 walks. And they bunted. Why are you bunting? What are you? And it was their number 2 hitter.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Yeah.
This can't be real. Like, I was sitting there and the boys in the dugout, there were 2 boys in the dugout with me. They were laughing. And they were like, hey, when you go over to coach third next inning, can you thank them for the out? And I was like, honestly, I should. Yeah. Like, he was really struggling.
We only have to get 21 of them. We're playing
only got to get 21. You just gave me one.
Yeah.
And, like, especially in youth baseball where, like, catchers are going to make mistakes.
Oh, sure.
And, like, if your argument for bunting is I want to advance the runner, wait 3 pitches.
It's a decent chance that bag's going to open up.
Or, and this goes back to your wild ass argument about spending more time sprinting. Steal the base. Try to steal it. That's a skill.
Yeah.
That's a skill that scales a little bit more than bunting does.
Sure.
Learning how to read a pitcher and steal the base.
Sure.
And, like, if you want to show bunt and then pull it back and let the guy steal the base, sure, get weird with it, whatever. But, like, there's other ways to accomplish. Like, if you are and this is really what it boils down to for me. If you're a youth coach who is trying to make a logical argument of why you're bunting, it's almost always going to come down to, like, advancing runners.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many ways to advance runners in Little League without bunting that I just don't like either you're not smart and you don't realize you're not baseball smart and you don't realize that there are other ways that you can advance that runner, or you are a lazy coach and you don't want to teach your kids to be better. So the easiest way to do it is just have the bad kids bunt so that you don't have to spend extra time developing them.
Bunting tests your discipline.
Yeah, I mean, I can't argue with that. Like if you're willing to like listen to like I'll flip that on its head.
Yeah.
I applaud a kid who is asked by his coach to bunt and does it. Because I would have absolutely been like, oh, sorry, I missed that sign. I'm so sorry. Like that's on me. That one's on me. Like it's not. I would have been. I would not have been cooperative about that because that was not a thing that I ever wanted to do. So like it does test your discipline if you're just like, God, he's asking me to bunt again. Am I ever going to swing? Whatever. I guess I'll do it for the team. Like, sure, it tests your discipline.
Well, and again, I think this is something that's very easily flipped around, right? Consider the discipline of the coach, right? And again, I hate to keep coming back to the same point, but for 30 or 40 hours, we've largely been talking about the exact same thing, which is, what are you trying to get out of this? Like, I've been in situations where I could have done the thing. I could have, like, I have a kid at the plate. The likelihood of this being a successful batted ball outcome that improves our chance to win, highly unlikely relative to this kid. Because again, don't have a time machine. It's rec ball. I get my team at the end of February. We're trying to win a inter-league championship at the end of May, right before All-Stars. It will test your discipline as a fully formed adult in the heat of the moment
To trust that kid.
To trust that kid.
Yeah.
And look, we can beat this proverbial horse to death, talking about the reasons why game theory optimalist doesn't work. This idea of like skill coordination is improved by bunting. This idea that fear of the ball is distilled by bunting. All of this stuff is just dumb and wrong. But the thing that I care about most are the signals that I send to the children that I'm working with. And I think that thing is a discipline thing as an adult, right? Because I've never coached a game that I wanted to lose, but I've never been willing to send that signal to my children or the children's that I was coaching that winning meant more than confirming the fact that I have confidence in them. And that confidence in a youth athlete is not going to be validated immediately oftentimes. It isn't that easy. Coaching children, we just had this conversation last week, man. Like, coaching kids isn't easier than coaching adults for any number of different reasons. But I think oftentimes 12, 13 and under, the most significant thing is like you are actively having to deal with the fact that they're walking a tightrope. Man, they're walking a tightrope, and this goes for the kids who are like studs at 11, 12, 13, and also the kids that are like regressive. You're walking that tightrope with them about how confident and competitive that they feel. And man, I just, at the end of the day, these kids are not showing up to high school baseball practices being asked about win-loss record of their club rec ball teams previous to. That's not a conversation anyone's happening. If that's true, if none of this winning and losing at 14 on down means anything, where's the value? I think there's more value in sending a signal to a kid that I believe in the work that you've been putting in, I believe in the effort, and I believe in your ability to do as best you can. Just go compete. Just go compete. And that type of competition is very different than asking a kid to lay it down.
Yeah.
It's like I'm asking you to compete in like a big air bubble, right? Like it's like, hey, go compete, but like only compete a little bit. Don't compete all the way because I don't trust you to do that. And you can't tell me that that's not the signal that's being sent.
Right. And there's not many signals stronger than I trust you to do that. Kid fails. Next time they're in that situation, hey, I still trust you to do this.
Man.
I
You're right.
I still believe in you. Go do the thing. And then you get the benefit of them figuring out how to do that. Because it might not happen the second time or the third time, but like if you're a good enough coach and the kid's good and the kid wants it enough, it's going to happen. And there's not much better than that.
Right.
When like your trust is validated like that and you see it in the kid on the other side, that like that kid's not going anywhere. And
that's parenting, man. You like that, because that's love. Like that. It's just love, man. You're dealing with a child, and you are going like, I accept you for who you are right now. I understand you're not going to act like an adult, and I still love you, and I'm still giving you all the runway in the world to do your best.
Is it the part of the podcast that I get to talk about the coach in the other dugout yesterday?
Because there's the other thing too, and again, it keeps coming back to it, right? Because when you infer and communicate that the intention of this thing is to win because that's the only way that we find value in the experience, then children act like children, inevitably.
Right.
And then they have some adult that's like, how dare you?
Right.
No, motherfucker, how dare you?
Yeah.
How dare you fucking tell a dugout of kids that they shouldn't be kids? Which is a thing that we heard on a field very recently. Yeah. Because that's what's happening.
The exact quote was you guys are all fucking pathetic. If you guys want to fucking play like kids, you can go find somewhere else to fucking play. At which point, I wanted to invite them all into my dugout. Because I would find a place for kids who don't want to be treated like that to play. And that was after like one inning. That was in the bottom of the
start.
Bottom of the first inning.
Start.
After they had just won the first game and played well. And there's not a more clear distillation of like, kids are going to take their cues from adults. They were all riding high in that first game. Everything's going well because we're winning. The second we start to lose, that coach from game one who's telling them, great job, like giving them high fives, telling them they're dudes, is now telling them they're fucking pathetic and that they are acting like children and that if they're going to act like children, they shouldn't be on his team. And like, that changed quick. Like real quick. And if I'm a kid in that dugout, like I am probably feeling not great about myself at the moment. And then like shocker of all shockers, that game wasn't very competitive.
It's a choice. Like this is an active choice.
Yep.
And like again, man, to whatever degree, we're complicit in some of this stuff because we have teams of kids, right? And we're in this travel ball space. Like I get all that. But again, as we move from like the building the airplane in the air phase to now having a system and now we're so clear about like why. Like we're just clear. Like one of our teams is like our mid-tier team at the age. I don't want to see I don't know how better to say it, right? They're not probably, I think, the team that we think is the most competitive, but they're not the least either. And the thing about what we do is that regardless of how they come in, everybody gets the same system. Everybody gets the same attention. This is the abject rejection of what like Duda was talking about when he was on the pod months ago, this idea that like the good kids kind of continue to get better most of the time because they get the most attention and focused effort from coaches, right? We do the other thing, which is we take all these kids and put them in the same system. And that team, and a lot of those kids are kids that we've had for some time now, right? That team went out and played an organization that's been around for a while. They're very good at winning at the youth level, and put it on them for 2 games. And I understand if you're a parent first time through, right? Like this is the first mover penalty. I remember being this parent. I remember watching 10U and 11U, 9 and 8, and like in being an asshole. I can't say that I wasn't that guy that I've always like, I think had my head screwed on correctly at about a more like developmentally progressive approach. I wasn't always that guy. That's why I'm so happy that I am right now. because I went into my son's game yesterday and I was just like at peace. I was the least stressed that I have ever been. But I understand those young parents that are like, it's really hard for them to understand that, like, hey, we're just gonna, we're gonna rob Peter to pay Paul a little bit.
Well, it's and I'll pull in some big league analogies here. A lot of youth organizations are the Angels. I'm going to try to get Shohei and Mike Trout and hope that we just stomp everybody.
Yep.
We are the Rays.
Yeah.
We may not have a Shohei or a Mike Trout, but are the worst player on our roster? It's going to be a lot better than the worst player on your roster because we spent a lot of time developing him.
Right.
And like, we're not going to be non-competitive because every kid that we put on a field is going to be able to compete.
Right.
And like, there are other teams that those kids quit because they lose games and it gets blamed on them because it can't possibly be Shohei or Mike Trout's fault.
Or it can't be Art Moreno's fault.
Or Art Moreno's fault.
Right. It certainly can't. And that's the tough thing, right? Is I think a lot of times as an adult, you have the ability to take like extreme ownership of the product you put on the field, or you do the other thing and turn it around. How dare you act like a child?
Yeah.
14-year-old child.
Right.
How dare you?
Yeah.
Because look, man, like
for making an error.
Right. Like in
because no big leaguer has ever made an error.
Well,
never seen it happen.
No. I get it, man. Like I understand. I understand all of these arguments. I understand that like it takes discipline as an adult coaching children to not take the easier path. I get that, but that just because it's difficult doesn't absolve you of responsibility. That's not how that works.
Right.
And again, when you stigmatize these kids and you put them in a box because you can't teach something that's not on the child, that's on you. These kids are inherently more adaptable to stimulus and environment that they are at any point other in their lives, right? Like, and you're punting on it. Like you just are. And that's okay. It's okay for people to have a different perspective about how they do this thing. I get it. It's funny. Like, my daughter and son are finally getting into Formula One. So we get a chance to like every Sunday, we get a chance to like sit down and watch races. And we talk about like why certain cars are competitive and why they're not. One of the things that Formula One has done is they kind of like are trying to distill some of the economic advantage that some teams have because they're not all equal there, right? So some cars are just have like it's a different design context, right? If the design idea is that we're gonna have a really draggy car, more drag, more downforce, more better handling is basically the simplest way to suggest this, right? The reality is though that like when some of these cars are beating you on like their trap speed difference until like total max speed on the big straightaway is like 20 plus miles an hour, there isn't enough drag and efficiency you can stack in the corners that negates the fact that those guys are 20 miles an hour faster than you on the straightaway. But all that is really, it's a concept, right? This is the way that we're going to try to maximize our ability to be competitive, and maybe you're right or you're wrong. I understand, and everybody is entitled to have a different idea about where they're trying to get, what they're trying to do with this thing. Youth baseball, club baseball, rec baseball, whatever. Mm-hmm. All we're saying with a lot of this talk about bunting and a lot of the large ideas about what we do here is just that like there's more value optimizing for the thing later. There just is. So hyper optimization for winning at like 11U is not the same thing. It's a very different path. Choose that path. It's a free country. And that's fine, but like when these kids get to the big field and they lack skill and they lack output, and who's that on?
Right. And again, they're entitled to their own opinion. They are entitled to go to another program.
Yep.
It's okay. They're like, I hold nothing against you if what we value is not important to you and you want to go somewhere else because they value what you value a little bit more strongly. Yeah. That's okay. That's okay. And like, you might make it. It happens.
Yep.
That's, I would argue that like, that's the outlier, but like outliers happen. Yeah. The term outliers is real for a reason. Like, sometimes kids in those situations that are suboptimal end up making it and they're fine.
Right.
And then those anecdotes get thrown back as to, well, this kid did it. Okay, well, that kid was an outlier. The vast majority of kids are not properly prepared for scaling up in field size and like then quit.
But that in that 11U parent is inherently ignorant about that thing. You know, they're just like they're inherently ignorant about the reality of what that looks like. And I want to do like a discrete episode that kind of talks about this, right? Somebody was in my mentions this weekend that was like, hey, can you guys start to build out this idea of like, what does a competitive freshman in high school baseball start to look like, right? And I think because we track all the things, we could probably like build that. You know, we can go like, hey, look, of all the high school kids we've had in the last couple of years, you know, the incoming freshmen that were the most competitive kind of looked like this, right? And because I've seen stuff, you know, like back in the day, you know, the ZEP sensor guys before they were RIP ZEP had like this kind of like bat speed. Well, 7U should be here, 8U, 9, 10, 11, 12, right? Pocket Radar has a version of that in terms of thrown ball velocity. I've seen Chad Longworth actually just I think a couple weeks ago had like a chart that had both. It was like 70th, 80th, 90th percentile or whatever, right? So I'd like to kind of use the data and start talking about this in a much more informed fashion. But in the interim, I think this just at the end of the day, it comes down to what do you need teaching your kids? You know, like what are you willing to make that sacrifice about, I understand I'm gonna negatively impact my ability to be competitive later because I'm maximizing for now. And I've seen that argument. I've seen that argument like specifically about like playing a crap ton of games in the summertime. My kid loves to do it. And like, and why shouldn't they? Right? Because my kid's never going to go play college baseball anyways. Like, sure, I like, and that's true, right? Like guys that go play college baseball, it's like what 7% of all high school. I mean, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, right? That's a real thing. I understand what you're saying. The point, though, is that like for the overwhelming majority of us, if you're not going to go play college baseball, what's the last frontier that you have? 90 foot in high school, right? Like that's it. And there is a construction of what that competitive player looks like that you can quantify,
Right.
And just kind of talk broadly about like the things that they're good at or the things that they might need to continue to solve. And there's the other thing. There is the other thing. There is the kid who is set up to be a sophomore starter on varsity, and there's a kid who's set up to be the equipment manager when they're a junior because they're just like, hey, I can't do this anymore. Yeah. And absent a time machine, when you make those choices, the choose your own adventure path about like what's most effective, what am I going to concentrate on? Am I going to maintain the discipline to teach this kid who has good bat speed, bad bat to ball skills? Can you teach? It's going to pay dividends later. It might take more time and focused attention to teach that now. It's going to be there when you need it more. And that's the whole thing.
Yep.
For me, you know, that's just the whole thing. And all of it pairs with this larger idea of what exactly we are trying to do with youth baseball. What is this thing for? What's it for? Is it for putting rings on children that are 7, 8, 9 years old?
No, probably not. Depends on who you are, but no. Yeah.
I mean, that's what all of this comes back to.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's this conversation about bunting, whether it's the other conversation about arm care, whether it's the other conversation about, well, why aren't we playing tournaments in February? All comes back to the same thing. And I'll you got to have an idea that like of where you're trying to go. You just need to, as an adult, I don't think it's unreasonable to suggest that you should just probably burn a couple calories and go like, where am I trying to get to? And I'm not saying you need to be reckless and irresponsible with the way that you kind of train skill and the way that you distribute kind of reps for games and training, all that other stuff. I'm not saying be crazy about it, right? Because kids love to play games, right? But like, what if everything's a game? We train 3 nights a week. We play games 3 nights a week.
Well, and I think people assume what kids like and don't like a lot
Oh, sure.
without actually like asking them and having that conversation. And I know like it's an 11-year-old, right? Like I'm not going to advocate that you let your 11-year-old make large life decisions or household choices. But like probably ask them before you're just like, all my 11-year-old wants to do is play games. Play games, play more tournaments. It's like, have you asked your 11-year-old? Does he really, like, he would really rather go and get 3 at-bats in a game as opposed to swinging in the cages and getting 50 swings?
Yeah.
And he'd really rather play left field and just sit out there in an indoor tournament in January.
Yeah.
Like, most kids are probably going to say, I mean, like, I guess maybe they would say the game, but, like, it's not that big of a difference for them. Whereas, like, the goal for parents is massive.
Yeah.
And, like, maybe it's tied to their enjoyment of it. They enjoy games a lot more than they enjoy just dropping their kid off at practice. And maybe it's just all about that. That there isn't a whole lot of consideration for the kid here. Of, like, what do they want and what's going to, like, maximize their skill output.
Yeah.
It's a bummer. It's a bummer. The amount of times I hear from parents things that are just like, well, my kid XYZ, and it's like, nah, I don't think a kid would say that. That sounds like an adult using their kid as like this. I'm giving my feedback for my kid. No, it's your feedback. You're just throwing your kid in there to like shield yourself a little bit.
Yeah,
and it's okay.
That's the tough part. And you know, in the ultimate thing there is like, as a parent, if you ask your child how they feel about something, it's possible that they may say, I don't want to do this. Right. And that's a thing, man. Like Danny and I joke all the time. Like I'll say to him, like, well, if you're still playing baseball next year. And I'm kind of joking, but I'm also kind of trying to incentivize the fact that I care more about my relationship with him as my child than I do about his career as a baseball player. Because like he could decide, hey, tomorrow I don't want to do this anymore, and I'm fine. But that's and I work here.
Yeah. And
I work here, and I am concerned about sending that signal to my children. So I would offer, not that I have any business telling anybody how to parent, but like, man, if your kid infers that like you're really into their athletic achievements, like inevitably for everyone, there is going to come a day when they stop playing. And what you want is a relationship with your child that is positively covered or colored by their time and participating in sports, but not defined by it.
Right.
You know, like this is like the George Brett thing, right? Like the Mutt Mantle stuff, right? We have examples at the highest level of guys who are incredibly successful in spite of this incredibly toxic relationship they have with their parents.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, man, you know,
outliers. Outliers.
Correct.
There's way more people out there that
Yep.
gave up a potential professional career because they had no interest in doing it anymore because their parents pushed them too much, or like,
Yep.
mom and dad care way too much about it, or like every one of our parents goes through the PCA thing, Positive Coaching Alliance, and like it is very clear to me that we need to do it twice a year.
Yeah.
And then like we did it in October, and then like we just need to re-up it again right before games start.
Yeah.
To like set the groundwork in October and then do it again right before games start to remind everybody, hey, this is how we act. These are the things that we show our kids we care about. So we don't ask wins or losses. Like, I did just say 3 minutes ago that like we should ask kids about like, what they want.
Sure.
But also kids don't know. They like take most of their cues from the adults around them. So if you as a parent are complaining or upset that your kid isn't playing more games, what signal do you think your kid is going to take from that?
Yeah.
If you don't understand that the value of you gained 7 miles an hour of thrown ball velocity this year, it's okay that like you have 3 neighbors that played a tournament in January because you throw harder than all of them now. And like, if you can't explain that to your kid or don't want to explain that to your kid, or you don't understand that yourself, why that's important, then this is just not the program for you.
Yeah.
But like the kids do, because I spend a lot of time with these kids. They have a lot of fun, and they understand the value of getting better. They're so excited when they PR in the cages or off the mound. They understand that's a huge win, and the effort it takes.
Yep.
Rewarding that effort of like you trained and this is your reward, as opposed to like you trained and then you go play games and like you lost. Where's your reward?
Yeah, it's balance. Like it's balance and it's context. Like you can give them both of those things. You can equip them with this idea that like I am iteratively developing my skill, and my skill improvement is a direct reflection of my consistency and effort, attitude, etc. You do that in training, and then you're going to go and compete. And the competition's going to be whatever. And, and again, at the end of the day, to bring it back to the bunting thing, all we're suggesting is just that like that message needs to be the consistency of the message is just as important as the attendance of the athlete in consistency.
Yep.
Right? Like you want to be consistent there. You can't be half pregnant in the way that you trust. You can't be half pregnant in the way that you love and support these kids. And for me, I'm kind of waffling a little bit in the last couple years because I have kind of gone like, all right, if you want to bunt in high school, I understand. But I am very clearly team bunt, team never bunt, 14 you down, because I think the best way I can send that signal as a coach is to be consistent with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I will trust you in the absence of any evidence to suggest that this is actually going to be like that's real trust. It's not trust that's kind of couched in, well, I'm going to trust you up until the point that your performance may negatively impact my ability to define my sense of self as a coach by winning. It's the other thing.
Yeah.
Which is very different. So, man, horse beaten to death.
Oh yeah, I mean it was dead probably before we started.
But
now it's unrecognizable.
But now, instead of being able to cherry pick tweets for where we've said that bunting was dumb, now you have like an hour of content that you can use to further substantiate that argument.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll end on a better note. We played the game before about like big leaguers you wouldn't want to say mean things to you,
sure.
and not. Okay, I got this one, and I don't know if this is going to be good at all. We'll just throw it out there. Okay. DoorDash delivery. Who are you most excited as a prior big leaguer to deliver your DoorDash? Who are you least excited?
Like if they were my DoorDash delivery driver.
You get the notification, your DoorDash driver is arriving, and you kind of go out onto the porch, car pulls into your driveway, lights come off, out of the car steps, most excited. And it can't be one of the guys, it can't be our previous thing.
So, I want to preface this.
Well, this is going to be good.
With I have no ill will towards DoorDash delivery drivers.
Sure, of course.
It's an absolutely viable job, side job, whatnot.
In the current gig economy, yes, we need that.
Where I'm going with this is if you are a former big leaguer and you are now driving DoorDash, some things went wrong in your life.
Sure. Let's posit that that this is just like a guy who just like needs something to do, right? He's made all the money.
Okay, so it's not for money. He just likes delivering people's food.
Yeah, it's not the sadness thing. Like, okay. Oh, I used to watch you play on TV, and now you're bringing me my Chipotle.
Oh, see, I was gonna take it the other way. I would love to watch John Swoltz walk near my apartment to deliver me DoorDash, so I could laugh at him. Yeah, you did this to yourself, man. You don't have a career because you are an old grumpy man that everyone hates.
Yeah, but that would be particularly affirming,
right? But if it's like the happiness factor, that's a good one. Oh man, you just sprung this on me too. I gotta really think about this.
Okay, so I'll go for guy that would make me most happiest. I would say Clayton Kershaw.
He just seems like he's a happy-go-lucky dude, like he would
he
with a smile on his face. He would deliver food,
yeah, like because it's very possible. I think with a guy like that I could just go like, hey man, it's been really inspiring to like watch you play this game, and I just appreciate it just as a fan, man, like a lifelong Dodger guy. Like I just appreciate that, right? And that could be like a very short interaction. Or it's possible that I could get like 30 minutes of him talking about coming up in the org, listening to Sandy Koufax. Like there's any number of positive, great ways that conversation could go.
Yep. So I would have. I think my answer. So I'm removing anybody that I've ever like been in a dugout with because that's not fair.
Yeah.
But I think Brett Phillips would be my answer.
Ooh, that'd be a good one.
I just want to spend time with the guy. Like he just exudes joy.
Yeah.
And like I think I would enjoy just hanging out with him for a few minutes as he delivers my DoorDash food. Yeah, that would probably be. It would have been before I have been on Zoom calls with him. Sam Fold.
Oh, sure.
Because
yeah,
I'm a big Sam Fold guy.
Yeah.
So that would have been like really cool.
Yeah.
Just be like, you're like my size. We probably share a lot of genetic traits. This is phenomenal. I remember as a child watching you run straight into the brick wall.
Yeah.
Thinking that the ivy was going to protect you.
Yeah.
It doesn't. There's just brick behind the ivy.
Yeah.
And still catch it. How badly did that hurt? Like I would want to like I'd want to hang out and ask questions, but like I'd like kind of talk to him. So Brett Phillips has got to be the one that's like, yeah, that guy would be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Is there like a who you want who would be the least?
Yeah, well, there has to be, right? There has to be like somebody who would just be like, man, this is just going to be a bummer. This is just going to be like a really unpleasant interaction. I'm not looking forward to this. I had a guy off the top of my head, and then I realized we've done some work with him, so I shouldn't say that name.
Fair.
That would not be smart, so I'll scrub that name off the list.
The first person that comes to my mind, and this is a real deep cut, and I've actually met this man, and I could say that story on the podcast too, but Randall Simon. If anybody remembers Randall Simon, he was a
very vaguely
portly first baseman who bounced around for a handful of teams, but is most well known for taking a bat to one of the sausages during the Brewers sausage race. He was standing.
How do I not know the story?
I think it was 2003, and he was like in the dugout on the Pirates, and the sausage race was happening, and they come around, and he just like winds up and swings and just takes out a sausage. Like the woman who was in the sausage costume ended up in the hospital. I think it was like a concussion or whatever. Like she lived, but like not a great thing. Like they asked him about it afterwards, and he was just like, "I thought it would be funny," and like that was all he could like come up with or whatever.
Shouldn't have been standing there.
He ended up getting traded like a couple weeks later, as you do in that situation, probably to the Cubs. Who I grew up a huge Cubs fan, and was on like the 2003, 2004 Cubs teams that were, I think it was 03, maybe it was 07, 08, but I think it was the 03, 04 Cubs teams. But the other story that I have met this man is the Schaumburg Boomers, I think is what they're called now. They were the Flyers. When I grew up. And I went to a game in high school with a couple buddies, and Randall Simon is announced as playing first base for the opposing team. And we're just like, there is no way it's the same Randall Simon. Well, steps out of the dugout, it's very clear it's the same Randall Simon. There's only one of these guys. Yeah. So we start chanting Sausage King, because that was like what he was colloquially known as after he did that.
Sure.
And
I mean, you're going to be kind of infamous if you take a bat to like
He called us over to the dugout. He hit a bomb.
Yeah, of course he did.
Pointed at us as he crossed home plate, called us over to the dugout, and came over and signed bats for us. Was like super nice about it.
Yeah.
And we just like. We didn't really know what to say to him. And then, of course, my buddy who doesn't listen to this podcast, but is probably, everyone's got that dumb friend in your group.
Yes.
And he's the dumb friend in my group, and asked him, all right, man, I got to know, why'd you do it? And he was standing there holding a bat in his hand when he asked him. And I was like, there's got to be a better time to do that. But he gave us the same answer where he was like, I really thought it was going to be funny. And like, it just, people didn't take it as a joke. And my buddy's like, yeah, that's generally people don't take it as a joke when you hit him with a bat. And then we turned and walked away. But that would be like really sad to see him. And I just like wouldn't know what to say. But for the real answer, I think for me is Corey Patterson, who again, this is another Cubs deep cut.
Yeah, deep cut for the Cubs there.
He was like a 2020 home run stolen base guy early on in his career. Blew out his knee trying to beat out, I think it was like an infield single, and just like stepped on first the wrong way, blew out his knee, and never was the same again. And they traded for, that was like, I think early 2000, that was like the first week of 2003, and they ended up trading for Kenny Lofton in the Randall Simon trade.
Yes.
And like Kenny Lofton just became their center fielder for the rest of the year and whatever, and like Corey Patterson just like never got his job back, or was like good again. So it'd just be like really sad to see him because I want to be like, man, like I loved you
Yeah.
when I was like 11,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
like you just there's so much unfulfilled, and like he knows it, I know it. It's like a
Yeah.
who would be least for you?
Jeff Kent is probably is probably the primer, just because he was one of those guys that, like, even as a kid, I was like, man, I don't think this guy like really enjoyed like. It looked
No,
like he's having a lot of
like
fun.
I believe if you look up the word red ass in a dictionary, it's just his face.
Yeah, just like just huge sourpuss, dude. Just like that would be a bummer. Yeah, I think Jeff Kent is just like, between the fact that he played for the Giants for so long, and that's just not my squad, and the guy just seems like supremely unenjoyable. I just imagine it'd be like, hey, thanks, man, because like I'm gonna and he's just gonna give me like some dirty look and just like turn his back on me, and then I'd be like, you know what? Barry Bonds is right. You are a jerk.
Yeah, I mean that's. I was gonna say, I'm pretty sure there's like they did not like each other.
Oh yeah, they hated each other as far as I know. Yeah, I think Jeff Kent is definitely the one.
I'm a big. I don't do food delivery a lot, but I do like tip pretty heavily when those people come. I would not tip John Smoltz.
No,
I would tip Randall Simon. I mean, that guy played in Indy ball, so like he probably needs it a little bit.
Yeah.
Corey Patterson never made it to like arbitration, or he may need it. Yeah. John Smoltz, no, I'm not giving you a tip, and I would like tell him to his face, like, you're not getting tipped for this. I'm not even gonna thank you.
Yeah, which is like, it's fair.
I might even do like the really bad dad joke and give him like a tip as like advice.
Well, I'll give you a tip, son.
I'll give you a tip. Don't hate baseball when you talk about it on a broadcast.
That's super weird.
It's like a tip that I'm sure somebody has given you in your life before. Like, it's less enjoyable to watch you broadcast a game when you despise the product you're broadcasting.
A novel idea.
But
yeah,
it's a story for another day.
Yeah. All right. So we'll get more fun callbacks to guys.
I promise it won't all be Cubs players from my childhood.
That's fair. I mean, my guys are Spike Owen, Clayton Kershaw, and like, we're homers. It's fine. So like, subscribe, turn the notification thing on, whatever mechanism you have the ability to like pump the algorithm for the show. Greatly appreciated. I do think that we should do like that idea of like a competitive kind of the competitive construction. Yeah. We can put some numbers to that. So we'll do that, I think, maybe these next couple times. We'll keep talking about arm care.
We've got a lot of freshmen that are extremely competitive right now.
Oh boy, which is a down, it's a gift and a curse when your competitiveness is causing you to get overworked. So shout out to Josh Rudd and Alan Jager. Had some great phone calls with those dudes this week about this whole arm care thing. And I am dumb and naive enough to think that at some point
we solved it.
Haven't solved baseball yet. But at some point, we can get more people kind of on this idea that like just the need for broad guidelines that go across all levels of baseball in this country just needs to happen. Like literally, my ats on Twitter this morning are getting blown up because some 9U kid went $108 like just now in March. So it's
our 13U team played a doubleheader, and both the starting pitcher and both ends for the other team threw 90 plus pitches.
Yeah.
95 pitches.
So yeah, we'll keep talking about the arm care thing. Bunting is just not the move, but do as you will, I suppose.
Bunting is bad coaching.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I think that's fair. I just like,
maybe not bad. Bunting is a coaching cop out.
Boy, and that is a tough pill to swallow.
But think about it. If you're a coach that's like, I love to bunt, think about it.
Yeah. And, and again, you approach this stuff from like the Carol Dweck, constant self-improvement. Mm-hmm. And, like, if that makes you feel some type of way, for us to suggest that bunting is a coaching cop-out, then like, ask yourself why. And if you're telling me that like, hey man, I'm a high school coach and I need to keep this job, so I need to win games, that is the part that I understand. Like, I completely get what you're saying. If you're coaching like 11U rec ball,
but like, I would even argue the high school coach, like, allocate time and make your kids better.
Yeah.
Don't be lazy about it.
Yeah, because
you're saying I need to win games. Okay, you can win games like that. Nobody is stopping you from like winning games and developing players. You're just taking the laziest possible path to win those games.
Yeah. And if you want some tools for teaching kids how to hit, drivelinebaseball.com, 425-523-4030, support at drivelinebaseball.com. Hackney Kinetic Chain Youth, Skills to Scale book, bunch of free hitting stuff, hitting plyos, mini hitting plyos, smash factor balls, vibrating massage ball. You might not be able to get those anymore. You missed out.
Trophy's not for sale, though.
Yeah, trophy's not for sale. Neither is the bazooka. That's all we got. We'll catch you guys next time. Thanks. Bye.